Yeah, this is weirdly good. Like, what's in this, you know?
Acid, natural artificial flavor, L-carnitine, L-titrate, chlorine, tartaric acid, caffeine, sodium benzoate, preservative.
That's a lot of crap, but at least I can see it. Let's back it up. To tell this story, we need to meet Dr. Harvey Wiley. Dr. Wiley was the chief chemist of the Department of Agriculture in 1883. With no regulation of food products in the United States, Dr. Wiley was concerned about the purity of what the public was eating. He began testing food, only to find it was indeed not pure. Food contained ingredients one would not expect, like the rancid animal fat found in bogus butter. Dr. Wiley's findings left him outraged, but led to no government action. So in 1902, Dr. Wiley organized the volunteer group, the Poison Squad. This group subjected themselves to the effects of the current chemical food preservatives, which raised attention to the public that the U.S. government needed to intervene. Consumer activism, especially by women's groups advocating for food safety standards and muckraking journalists, exposing fraud, furthered the support. A passage from the novel reveals there was never the least attention paid to what was cut up for sausage. It would come all the way back from Europe. Old sausage that had been rejected, was moldy and white, would be dosed with borax and glycerin and dumped into the hoppers and made over again for home consumption. Because of this novel, Roosevelt called for inspections which found Sinclair's claims to be true. After resistance to the law from senators with links to the food industry, Roosevelt signed the Pure Food and Drug Act in 1906. This was the first of many legislations to regulate food, medicine, and products in the United States. The Pure Food and Drug Act ensured manufacturers could be prosecuted for adulterated food or misleading drugs, but food standards were not included in the law until 1938. Prior to 1938, the law did not cover cosmetics and only allowed action after a product was released. This resulted in horrific, unsafe products. Lash Lure was an eyelash dye which resulted in blisters, ulcers, and even blindness. More than 105 people died from the elixir of sulfonamide, an untested drug containing diethylene glycol. This chemical is used in antifreeze today, and when it's ingested, it becomes more toxic while it's broken down by the liver. Had the medicine been tested on mice before, this incident would have been prevented. By 1938, the Pure Food and Drug Act was revised to require scientific testing, and since then it has been revised multiple times. This brings us to our present day. We may take over-the-counter medicine without worrying about dying, or treating a headache or opening a can of tuna, feeling safe about where it came from. But the argument remains, does packaging mislead us today on the ingredients we are consuming? While the Pure Food and Drug Act means the nutrition label must be accurate, the package itself can claim to be organic, keto, a healthy alternative, skinny, or low sugar. The label may contain ingredients synonymous for an unhealthier ingredient, but the packaging does not have to be as transparent. This is more of a demand for the consumer to be knowledgeable about the ingredients. As a health conscious individual myself, it's overwhelming to learn 50 different names for sugar and try to remain in the recommended daily intake. The history of the Pure Food and Drug Act creates gratitude today for the transparency we do have on labels. And determining if a food is healthy is a far better challenge than determining if the food is safe in the first place. Additionally, the history teaches us about democracy. Now we're back to a girl and her energy drink, and it's dark outside, because editing takes a long time. But let's just take a second to say, my personal connection to this is that of every other consumer. The reason the Pure Food and Drug Act is important is because now we, while we may not know exactly what citric acid is, someone smarter than I do definitely does, we know that it's in here. And that is a huge improvement from the 1800s and the early 1900s when people were dying because they thought a drug was going to give them a cure to their headache and it actually ends up killing them. The personal connection to this topic is the same as every other consumer who enjoys being able to know that they are going to be safely consuming something in America. That brings me into the next point of why others should learn about this. It's important to be grateful for how far we have come in history as well as to not be doomed to repeat it. If we are able to recognize that in the past, people in government, and this is my opinion here, but in the past, people in government had resisted legislation changes to the Pure Food and Drug Act because they were making money off of the cheap ingredients that were used to sell butter and not have it actually be butter. Then, when we're trying to make progresses in democracy today, it's important to know that there are people in high places who are going to be resistant to the change. So it's all the more important to have groups of people protesting together. And then another note, speaking as just a woman, it is encouraging to see women coming together in democracy, okay? And this did happen for the Pure Food and Drug Act. Mothers were grouping together because they wanted to be able to feed their families properly, and that is a huge, cool thing to see, and I think it's encouraging for the current day whenever we're wanting to make political changes to look at how people did it in the past. If they were successful, we can still be successful. So, cheers to knowing what's in my drink. Think!